All right, folks, how are we doing? Today we're settling in for how do I get stronger legs for football? It's a big question. I seem to get asked quite a lot, mainly because, look, I'm here in the UK. When I refer to football, I'm talking about soccer for you guys over in the States if you're watching, right? Hugely popular sport, probably the most popular sport in the world. I've got a bunch of friends and family members that play football. So it is a question you get asked a lot, comes up in conversation. So I'm quite excited, really, to sort of try and share some of my experiences that I've had from working with various soccer athletes and various football athletes over the years. Basically what I do to get their legs stronger in a way that really carries over to the sport. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And as you guess, strong legs are essential building blocks in most sports. Football's no exception. If you want those explosive speed, different dynamic changes of direction on the pitch, the ability to avoid injury, to absorb forces properly, that's all really important stuff for football. So acceleration, sprint, change of direction, strong legs, great carryover to football. And it might seem like, okay, well, it's pretty straightforward. Let's just do some heavy squats. Bob's your uncle, strong legs. In principle, yes. In practice, doesn't really tend to work like that. And there are a few more considerations and factors that we have to look at. So we're going to start with our table of contents. Okay, so we're going to talk about training with football in mind, injuries, imbalances, and frequency of training. We're then going to talk about the types of leg training that we've used with our athletes. I'm going to go on to what I call sort of top 5 exercises for getting stronger at football. Now, these are all open to debate, and I've actually switched my mind on these quite a lot, but these are 5 exercises that I've found good effectiveness with my athletes over the years, so I wanted to share those. We're going to provide an example football leg strength workout, and then we're just going to finish off with a few FAQs, just generally about football leg strength and how you might program your training for leg strength specific to football. All right, so let's jump into it. As you'll notice, as I'm going through this, I'm sort of walking you through some of these visual guides alongside it. If you guys are listening on the podcast afterwards, because I tend to upload these as podcasts too, I'll just try to describe anything visual so that you've got a bit of a link, or I'll try and link them down in the description. All right, so training with football in mind, injuries, imbalances, frequency. One of the things that I like to do when I look at a sport, and sort of football being no exception, is I like to look at injury data and look at where injuries occur. For football, about 12% of all injuries come from the hamstrings, usually because top-end running, top-end sprinting, it involves that really, really long stretch of the hamstrings. And then in that long, lengthened stretch position, the hamstring then contacts the floor really aggressively. So you get this really aggressive contraction in that lengthened position. So hamstrings need to be super, super strong if you want to be maximally sprinting and reducing your chances of injury, right? Both strong and strong in a lengthened position specifically. We also know that 60% of all injuries in the quadriceps come from the dominant leg. So there's very much a unilateral muscle imbalance situation going on where one leg has to take more of the load. So that's something that needs to be addressed in our training. We also need to think a little bit about balancing the strength training that we do alongside actual football matches and alongside our actual sports training, right? So you don't want to get into this situation where you do so much strength and conditioning that it negatively impacts your sports practice, because it's kind of the opposite of what we want. So what typically that looks like is that most of the guys that I program strength and conditioning for that also play sports like football, you're going to be looking at training your legs 1 to 2 times per week. Now, that might be one specific leg-focused strength session, or that might be something like 2 full-body workouts that both have a leg, a lower body or a leg strength component. So they're generally the ways that you might structure it. Some people might do a bit more. If you're in your off season, you might do a bit more. If you're in an easier section of your preseason, you might do a bit more. But generally, since the football competitive season is so long, most preseasons tend to be quite intensive too. You're talking only 1 or 2 S&C sessions a week for the most part, right? Now, on to types of leg training. So the main thing I like to think about is making our training a bit more performance focused. So that means that I like to use a combination of unilateral and bilateral movement patterns. I think the main thing is it has a coordination element, but it also has the ability to how to put this? You're strengthening both legs in an equal manner, and doing bilateral movements, just both-sided movements, squats all the time, is great, but some inconsistencies will develop. You will have one leg that takes over more than the other a little bit, and we really want your ability to produce force specifically through one leg at a time, because it's going to have that great carryover to your sprinting, your jumping, all these kind of things, right? So that's one consideration. We also want to think about having a mixture of power and strength exercises. So we don't just want to be really, really strong. Think like a power lifter grinding a squat out for 10 seconds. Great for moving maximal weight, but we want you to be able to produce maximal force quickly, or to be able to produce even sub-maximal forces very, very quickly. That's what sprinting is about. That's what acceleration is about. So for you guys, you need to have those power exercises to train your rate of force development. So that's why we have them in here. Exercises also need to be trained in multiple planes of motion, up and down, side to side. We're trying to accommodate those rapid changes of direction that occur in the pitch. So we want your body used to moving in different directions. Pretty sensible, right? We also need exercises to accommodate the nature of the sport itself and its requirements, which we're going to talk a little bit more down below. All right, so top 5 exercises for getting stronger. Again, look, in principle, there are no such thing as a top 5 exercises, right? It's just these are 5 exercises that I found effective over the years, time and time again. And you can use variations of these, you can use different things, but they give you an example of like the categories that you might see. So hip thrust, big fan of things like hip thrusts. They're a very easy to perform exercise, very low injury risk. You have to be incredibly dumb to get them wrong. So they're very quick to teach athletes. Like even if you've got very little gym experience, you can do a hip thrust. So what I'm describing is like that movement where you've got your shoulders on the bench, like you can see in this picture here. I'm describing this for you podcast folks as well, like shoulders on the bench, barbell or some kind of weight around the hips. And it's like a glute bridge, but with a larger range of motion. So you're training that hip extension strength. There's plenty of research showing that it has a good supporting carryover, specifically to things like vertical jump height, initial sprint speed, acceleration, and T-chest agility drills. Potentially even a better carryover than things like the back squat. And that was from studies in a football-focused test group. So if you're thinking about carryover to football, hip thrusts may have some really good carryover, really easy to set up. So plenty of reasons that you can bang hip thrusts into your program. We talked about Romanian deadlift. Earlier on in this, I mentioned that we want to strengthen the hamstrings in the lengthened position. Well, the RDLs, the Romanian deadlift, does exactly that. It strengthens the hamstrings in that lengthened, that stretched position. And over time, you work to increase that range of motion really, really comfortably. If you can do a Romanian deadlift all the way with like your knees basically not locked out, but close, all the way down to the floor and up, your hamstrings are going to be incredibly strong throughout a really great range of motion. And your chance of top end like sprint injuries occurring is definitely going to go down, okay? Provided that you are regularly training sprinting alongside that. So that's why we have those. We also like to include some kind of unilateral weighted variation. Here I've talked about like a front-loaded split squat. So it's a split squat in the front rack. The description here is like a front rack being like a lunge where you're not moving forwards or backwards, you're just going straight up and down in a split stance position. Front rack being that the bar's like on your shoulders. What I really like about this is it's also got a little bit of core component. It's also got some, like, how to describe it, like upper back kind of working component. It's a good postural component. It tends to require a slightly lighter load than something like a back squat, so it's less demanding on the central nervous system, but it's still loadable enough that you can challenge your legs unilaterally. So that's quite nice. Sometimes in place of this, we'll also do like a split squat with the bar loaded on the back. Sometimes we'll add in walk-in lunges, things like that, but there's plenty of unilateral variations you can use. Other exercises we've played around with are bounds. So lateral bounds. Specifically, I like to do side-to-side bounds, but you can also do bounds on like a 45-degree acute lateral kind of zigzag. These are really, really good for multiple reasons. Like you are learning to improve not just your lateral mobility and movement, but you're training essentially your muscles' ability to absorb force and then to redirect that force. So not only can they absorb the force faster and more efficiently, but then you're able to rebound quicker. So think about like rapid changes of direction and keeping yourself safe while doing so. Introducing some kind of bounds, side to side, lateral bounds, acute zigzag bounds, some kind of plyometrics that have that side to side kind of function. Really, really useful for both injury prevention and performance. And then lastly, I've suggested like an isometric back squat. I tend to vary. I'll have training phases where my guys go through isometric back squats, sometimes regular back squats, sometimes slow eccentric back squats. What I like about isometrics is that you can hold a specific position. So you might find a 90-degree position or just below 90-degree position. And there's been some really good recent research showing that there's some really beneficial carryover for football players, specifically talking about that explosive power in kind of knee flexion and extension, which is really cool, right? So there's different ways to do this. You could just do like a squat, regular barbell on the back, go down to 90 degrees or just below 90 degrees. And that's an actual 90 degrees, not like a pretend quarter squat 90 degrees, like actually going down into a good challenging position in a squat and then just holding the bar there. My favorite way of doing this, if you have the kit, is actually doing the form of isometric where you're pushing maximally against an immovable object. So you set your barbell up against with like the racks or the pins above it and try and push up into it for 5 to 6 seconds. It is a stressful exercise. You're not going to do it a lot, but in terms of developing your maximal ability to produce like maximal effort forces as fast as possible, it's really hard to beat that. In fact, it's actually one of the things that we commonly use in rate of force production testing in a lab. You would set up like an isometric mid-thigh pull or an isometric back squat and use that to test exactly those qualities. So that's why it is really validated, really good to use. But it is stressful, so keep that in mind, right? Now, putting this together, an example football leg workout, what does this look like? Well, what I've done is I've broken this table down. So I've said exercises, front split squat, hip thrusts, dumbbell step-ups, lateral bounds, and then something like a kettlebell hip flexor raise because it has a good carryover to sprinting. Good to have nice, strong, capable hip flexors. For sets of each of those, I'm just saying 3 sets, standardized of each. And for reps, you're looking at roughly something between 3 and 8 reps. You might go a little bit higher on the hip thrusts, something like 8 to 12. On the front split squats, I tend to like 5 to 8 reps per leg because much higher than that, and I find my breathing just takes over a little bit, depending on where I'm at. If you're a football player and you're doing aerobic work regularly, your chances are you're fitter than me as your average like strength and conditioning coach, right? So that's kind of what I would structure into a program. And those sets are variable. Towards the start of a program, you might do a few less sets. Towards the end of a program, you might do a few more sets, right? But you can adjust that based on how your body responds. This is just an example session. And as I've made this little note of here, if you want something more detailed and more in depth, this is what I do. Like I write specific training programs, I do custom programs. Just reach out to me. If you want something that's fully like planned out for you, that's what I do. Right. Frequently asked questions, just to round this off. I get asked a lot, do you actually need strong legs for football? Yes. I swear to God, the amount of people that think you can just play nothing but football and do no S&C and perform at your maximum is just crazy. Like it's not possible at all. Football is an incredibly physically demanding sport, especially the higher up the levels you go. If you look at the speed of play, the speed of sprints, acceleration, change of direction at the top level, it is incomparable to where it was even 10 years ago, 20 years ago. If you look at games like footy games from like 30 years ago, it's a night and day difference. So you need strong legs to be able to do all of those things. If not, you're just not going to be able to keep up. It's just not even going to be like, if you physically can't get to where the ball is before your opponents get there, it doesn't matter how good you are on the ball, you're just not getting to it. So it really is important. Next question, should you lift heavy as a footballer? Yes, you're not a weightlifter, you're not a powerlifter, you don't have to be maxing out all the time, but you do need to be lifting heavy with intent. Like you need an intent to lift heavy with good form to reach the prescribed number of reps. And the exact amount that you do is going to be based around your program, but you do need an intent to be lifting heavy and getting stronger over time. How often should you train legs to play football? I think for the most part, once or twice per week is a really good starting point. And then do footballers skip leg day? This is ridiculous, right? Again, it links to the top one. No, good footballers at the highest level, they really don't, guys, okay? You've got to be working on your leg strength, power, change of direction ability, your leg mobility, your strength at those long muscle lengths, all of this stuff. If you want to actually maximize your footy performance, something you're going to have to do, okay? That's basically it. I'm going to wrap that up there. If you have any specific comments, questions, just shut them down in the comment section below. I will do my best to answer them. I'm not always the best because sometimes I'm busy coaching and lecturing and all kinds of sort of stuff like that. But do reach out and I'll do my best to get back to you. Just give this a try for a few weeks, see how your body responds, or just try and take some of the principles and apply it to your own training. And just like I said before, right, if you want a little bit more guidance, a bit more support, then feel free to reach out and chat, okay? My entire business is based around one-to-one coaching and custom programming. That's exactly what I do. That's what I offer. It's what I've been doing for 10 years now, professional S&C coaching. So if that's something you want, someone that's sort of, to be honest, no nonsense, very to the point, very evidence-based. I just place a lot of emphasis on building good relationships with my athletes. If that sounds like something that interests you, reach out. If not, then hopefully you got something good from this video, and feel free to tune in, just watch any more content that comes out, just get as much out of it as you can. All right, I'll catch you in the next one. See you there.